is Community Connections, airing on OROMIA11. As always, I am your host, Anna Orr, and I'm excited to talk to you today with this special episode of Community Connections. As you can tell, I am in pink today because October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And today's special guest, Ms. Reona Berry, will be with us on behalf of the African American Breast Cancer Alliance, providing us with some life-saving tips, resources, and some information that we can use to not only help save a sister, but also encourage our brothers to go get checked as well. This is going to be a really powerful episode, and I look forward to talking to you.
daa'ima argachuuf karoora yookiin ulfa garaa qabdu moo deettanii harma hoosisaa jirtan dubartoonni ulfaa talaallii COVID-19 akka fudhataniif ogeessonni fayyaa cimsanii gorsu talaalliin COVID-19 dubartoota ulfaatii fi ulfa garaa keessa jiru irratti miidhaa cinaa akka hin qabne qorannoowwan garagaraa qorataman ni mul'isu yeroo ulfaa'anitti talaallii COVID-19 fudhachuun haadhaa fi daa'ima garaa keessa jiru vaayirasii COVID-19tiin akka hin hubamne gargaara. Haati daa'ima hoosiftu talaallii COVID-19 yoo fudhatte fayyaa isii eeguu biras dabree talaallii kana keessa qabiyyeen qorichaa fayyaa daa'ima garaa jiruuf daa'imni akka dhukkuba vaayirasii koronaa irraa eegamu gargaara. Talaalliin COVID-19 haawwan gara fuulduraatti ulfaa'uudhaaf karoora qaban kanneen ulfa garaa qabanii fi haawwan daa'imman harma hoosisaa jiraniif hedduu barbaachisaadha. Talaallii COVID-19 fudhachuun dubartoota ulfaatiif maaf barbaachisa? Dubartoonni ulfa garaa qaban talaallii COVID-19 yoo hin fudhatin dhukkuba cimaa isaanii fi daa'ima garaa jirullee haalaan miidhuu maluun qabamuu danda'an. Talaallii COVID-19 talaalamuu dhabuun ulfi garaa jiru xiqqaatee akka dhalatu taasisuu, ulfi garatti akka hafu taasisuu fi dhibeewwan garagaraatiifis akka saaxilaman godhuu danda'a. Akka qorannoowwan geggeeffaman hedduu mul'isanitti dubartoonni ulfaa'anii talaallii COVID-19 hin fudhanne dubartoota kaawwan caalaa dhibeen fayyaa walxaxaa ta'e akka isaan mudachuu maluu fi carraan dhukkubsatanii siree irratti wal'aanamus bal'aa akka ta'ee fi daa'imni garaa jirullee dhibeewwan hamaa garagaraatiif saaxilamuu akka danda'u ni mul'isan. Inumaayyuu dubartoonni ulfaa talaallii dabalataa yookiin booster dose talaalamuun carraa vaayirasii koronaatiin dhukkubsachuu isaanii xiqqeessuu akka qaban ogeessonni fayyaa gorsu. Dhiibbaan talaalliin COVID-19 fayyaa wal hormaataa irratti fidu jira laata? Namoonni tokko tokko talaallii COVID-19 fudhachuun wal hormaata irratti rakkoo fida jedhanii yaadu. Kun gonkumaa dhugaa miti. Ragaa qorannoo saayinsawaa tokkollee hin qabu. Talaalliin COVID-19 dubartoota ulfaatiif amansiisaa fi bu'a qabeessa. Talaallii COVID-19 irratti gaafiiwwan garagaraa yoo qabaattan gara buufataalee fayyaa isinitti dhihoo jiranii deemuun yookiin bilbiluun ogeeyyota dubbisuu ni dandeettu. Talaallii COVID-19 fudhachuudhaan maatii fayya qabeessa haa guddifnu jechuudhaan dabalataanis bilbila bilisaa 833 431 2053 irratti bilbiluudhaan odeeffannoo COVID-19 wal qabatu Departmentii Fayyaa Minnesota irraa argachuu ni dandeettu.
I'm so excited to have you joining me today on behalf of the African American Breast Cancer Alliance. Can you introduce yourself to our viewers and talk just a little bit about your role with the organization?
My name is Reona Berry. I'm the CEO, President, co-founder of the African American Breast Cancer Alliance. And we were established in 1990, and so for the last 32 years we've been sharing information, education, and support for Black women who have been diagnosed with breast cancer.
I don't think so many people really recognize how prevalent breast cancer is in our community, and I think it's becoming closer and closer. Usually we hear that say that, what is it? It's 6 degrees of separation between us and someone else that knows someone else. But I feel like the window on that is closing around breast cancer, specifically in the African American community. Can you talk a little bit about that, Ms. Reona?
Well, the one thing we found when we started our organization that people didn't talk about cancer. It was considered the big C. And so when we were diagnosed, my friends and I, 32 years ago, we thought that, am I the only Black woman in Minnesota with breast cancer? And so we thought that for some reason Black women didn't talk about breast cancer. The community didn't talk about cancer. And that was the reason we came together, because we thought if we're dealing with breast cancer, there has to be other women who are and just don't know what to do, simply because there was no information about breast cancer for black women. You never saw a black woman on television or in the magazines getting a mammogram. So a lot of black women had the really conception that breast cancer was a white woman's disease, and it was not something they had to be concerned with. So we thought it's time to put together something, because if the 6 or 7 of us that came together talked about it, where are the other women? And we need to reach out to them, because if we were shaking in fear about this disease, others were shaking in fear and actually probably suffering in silence.
I agree with you. Suffering in silence, that's a powerful statement to make, but I think you're very much so right about that. Now, I don't know if many people know, but October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And so we here today are talking to not only further the conversation, but to also provide resources, hope, and information for men and women that are navigating this terrible illness. Now, according to the American Cancer Society, more black women die from breast cancer than any other cancer. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you've seen that not only within your organization, but also personally within the 6 and 7 women you've spoken with that began the work at AABCA?
Well, it's true. And some of the reasons why black women have such a high death rate is because, one, they're finding out that black women have a very aggressive growing cancer. A lot of black women tend to not get their mammograms, not do detection. They have a lot of issues maybe that keeps them from going to the doctor. They might not have enough insurance. And so consequently, all of these barriers that they face can result in a low detection rate and a low survival rate, because if you have an aggressive breast cancer, you need aggressive treatment. And a lot of women are afraid of the treatment, the chemotherapy, the radiation therapy, because they've heard things such as the chemotherapy makes you sick and you'll vomit a lot. And it says, yeah, but the chemo, I would say, it does do that. It really does. But it will definitely be part of your survival process. And for black women who tend to not trust the medical system, because we have history, the Tuskegee Institute experiment, people just don't trust the medical system in a lot of ways. So trying to educate them about the mammograms. Mammograms hurt, so I can't get one. No, so what I do is sometimes I pinch their hand. It's like, did that hurt? Well, no. I said, well, a mammogram can be like that. And they need to know that black women have dense breasts in most cases, and they need special mammograms to find those tumors. And so it's a lot of education, and it's a lot of fear that we have to help them get over, because first of all, black women are being diagnosed at younger ages. I was 38. There are women in their 20s that are being diagnosed and told that, well, you're too young for breast cancer, you're too young for a mammogram. And we have plenty of 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds that are diagnosed with breast cancer and even 4th stage breast cancer. So it's a lot of education that needs to be done. And people have to say, I'm worthy of getting a mammogram. I'm worthy of doing my own breast check. I'm worthy of living a healthy life, and not kind of fall into that trap of it's not going to happen to me. It's not in my family. And like you said, those 6 degrees of separate, we don't know what that is, but the fact that we have relatives that we don't even know about that had breast cancer. Some people are adopted, they just don't know. So it's a lot of education.
Now, what do you say to men who are watching this and say, well, I don't have to pay attention to this episode, or because it's about breast cancer, that's not something that concerns me?
Oh, so true. Black men and men in general think it's a woman's disease. Primarily it is. However, men can carry the gene. So if they've had a first-degree relative, mother, aunt, sister, that has breast cancer, they could be carrying the gene. And if they have children, they can pass on the gene. So maybe 100 men out of 1,000 might be diagnosed, I would say maybe 100 men out of 10,000 men might be diagnosed with breast cancer. So they need to be aware of it too, because it moves faster in men simply because they don't have a lot of breast tissue. So people that they've heard about, men that they've heard about, like Richard Roundtree, Beyonce's father, newly diagnosed. So these are things they need to know too. And they also need to know as to how to help the woman in their life that has breast cancer.
I think that's powerful. I know that personally, I didn't know that men could get breast cancer until I seen the clip online about Richard Roundtree coming forward and talking about his own diagnosis and navigating that.
Right.
So I think not only more black men that become visible, but more people that come out and speak out, advocates like yourself that are saying, no, men, you need to go get tested as well.
Right.
And the specifics around breast density, not only in black women, but black men as well, make us more prone to have this illness.
Right.
I also was reading a bit on the website about the different kinds of breast cancer. There is not just one kind, one size fits all for everyone. So I think there definitely is a lot more education that needs to happen within our communities to not only inform young men and women, but also our elders about the different ways that this illness is affecting and attacking our communities.
That is true. Unfortunately, a lot of older women think that because they are past menopause, in some cases, they don't have to worry about breast cancer. But there are a lot of 70, 80, 90-year-old women that still are diagnosed with breast cancer simply because they think that, well, I'm old. I don't need to get checked for a mammogram or breast cancer. But breast cancer doesn't have a time limit. Unfortunately, a couple years ago, there was like I believe she was 10 years old, was diagnosed. Rare, super rare, but it can happen. It really can.
Now, we've been talking about how rapidly that cancer is growing in our community, but according to the American Cancer Society, there are upwards of 250,000 new cases diagnosed a year, and we take up about 30% of that diagnosis.
Correct.
I don't think we begin to think about what those numbers look like and how close it actually gets without, like you said, looking at our family histories. And for those of us that may not have access to that for whatever reason, may not realize it may be much closer than we think.
Absolutely.
Another common tidbit I read online was that for decades, lung cancer had been the leading cause of death from cancer for both black men and white women. Both black men and women. And then in 2019, breast cancer became the leading cause of death for black women.
Yes.
Many black people stopped smoking cigarettes in the 70s, and so there was a rapid decline for our numbers, while many of our white counterparts continued to smoke, with lung cancer being one of the largest killers for their population. We also deal with cancer being the second leading cause of death in both black and white people after heart disease. The connection of this, I think, is so important to our communities, because things like having cancer in your body or having something attack your heart, your major vital organs, as we like to call them, is really a life or death situation. Can you talk to me about your personal connection in becoming one of those cases diagnosed 32 years ago?
Well, I thought back, and at age 35, I found a lump in my left breast. So I went in, and they actually did a biopsy and found that it was a cyst. Okay, at age 35, I was probably premenopausal. So I was like, cool. At age 38, I found a dark circle, like a rash, a watermark rash, underneath my underarm and on the side of my breast. And it didn't itch, and it didn't hurt, and didn't flake, but it kept spreading, getting larger and larger in a circular kind of pattern. And I thought, well, you know, I'm in a new relationship right now. I don't have time for this. And it didn't bother me. You know, I kept watching it, you know, because, you know, someone said, well, maybe it's your deodorant. And I said, no. So because I put cream on it, it didn't go away. So by November, I'm laying in bed and I can feel this hot, painful lump on the side. And when I walked, my arm would brush against my breast and it's like it hurt. So I actually got out of bed, looked up my medical books, and read that cancer can be painful. The cells are actively growing. That's why they generate heat. And it's something that I thought, well, with my luck, it'll be breast cancer. And there was an article in Ebony magazine about breast cancer, and I read that too. And I was like, yeah, I think so. So eventually, I did get a doctor's appointment for a biopsy, and the doctor did a needle biopsy where they insert the needle into the lump area to pull out fluid to see if it was fluid-based. And he wasn't able to pull out any fluid, and he said, and I knew that was not a good one. And from there, I had an excisional biopsy where they took out the lump and surrounding tissue. And as I was coming out of the OR, the nurse said, oh, I'm so sorry, it's positive. I'm like, okay. And later I found out positive meant it was positive for cancer. Then from there, I met with my oncologist, and she told me that if it spreads to the brain, the bone, or the liver, there was nothing they could do. And as she's talking, I just see her lips moving, and I'm looking out the window, and it was like what they call an out-of-body experience. And I was like, okay. And from what I learned, you know, I left the doctor's office, and I called my supervisor and told her what the next step would be, that I had to go to surgery again. And driving home, I drove through a stop sign because I was just so in shock, you know, and I just wanted to get home. And from there, it was, okay, what am I going to do? And I talked to one of the deans at the medical school, and I showed him my protocol for treatment, and he just advised me what was a good pattern to take on this. And so I just moved ahead, and the oncologist said, let's see if you're going to be able to qualify for this clinical study. And luckily I did. So I was able to be in the study, have all my medications paid for, and actually I was randomized to a protocol where it was 6 weeks treatment instead of 6 months. And I had a port inserted, so I didn't have to do it through my hand, the veins, because I saw a movie about that with a woman, and I was just devastated. I was like, oh my God, I don't think I can go through that. And it was something that I said, we just have to keep moving ahead. You can't stop, you know, it's because the bottom line is you want to live. And that's how I was able to go through this step by step, day by day. And after I had my treatments, my radiation, throughout all that time, I cried every day. But I had to kind of get it out before I went to work, because I didn't want to cry at work, you know. But so it was something, you know. I think when I lost my hair, it was funny because all I had left was like a little Friar Tuck ring of hair left. And I didn't want to lose that until those little hairs were hanging on so tightly and they started to hurt. And I said, okay, we're done with this. So I clipped it off and looked at my bald head and said, oh, that's not so bad. So you have to find positives in the negatives of life, you know. So I was able to keep moving forward, and as we were moving forward with our organization, because I finished my treatment in July, and throughout that time I was going to the support group that the YWCA had at that time for women that had breast cancer. And that's where I met the other black women there, and we were all kind of, wow, I'm so glad to see you.
Right.
And from there, that's where the conversation started. And it was just a great way to be empowered and advocate for ourselves and other women.
In those early years, aside from you all trying to not only fight for your lives and create a sense of community for yourselves, what was some of the focus that you felt you wanted to impart in beginning the African American Breast Cancer Alliance?
Well, what we did say was take care and take charge of your life, learn about breast cancer, and the bottom line is know that you're not alone, because that's one of the things that can keep people from moving forward. The fear keeps them from moving forward. And yes, the side effects. I mean, when our fingers and hands and toes and feet and tongue turned dark from the chemotherapy, and our doctor said, oh, I've never seen anything like that before, which told us that they hadn't had a lot of black women as patients, because what we found out was the melanin in our skin caused our skin to turn dark from these treatments.
That's very powerful to know. So for anyone that is dealing with this themselves, please know that this may not be something that your doctor has seen before or that they can even help you navigate, because this is something that is predominantly in the African American population because of our melanin.
Exactly. And so from there we really learned that we can help the doctors and nurses learn as we were learning, because it became a fear factor in our recovery. He says, okay, what's happening? And of course, as you're healing from surgery, the pain, the pain from the nerves trying to regenerate in the breast and the underarm makes you think, oh, is the cancer coming back? So we had to learn what to expect, and that's where we shared our experiences. We had to say, is this happening to you? And he said, yeah, so we had to talk about it, because other women were asking us these questions, and we were able to give them these answers that, yeah, that's what happens, and you might feel this for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So we had to be able to go through this process ourselves, put down some answers so we could give these answers to other women that were going through it, because, as I said, fear really can control your life, and we had to be there for them. And that was the one thing about our brochure. There was no culturally specific information for black women and breast cancer, so we created our own, and the American Cancer Society said, oh, this is great. They funded it, they printed it, they distributed it, and from there it went around the country. So we were like the first to really create a national, culturally specific brochure about breast cancer for black women.
I love hearing that you and these 6, 7 other women were the blueprint for so many other women, and that you're able to still continue this work to this very day.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk to me about the programs you guys offer and some of the continued education you guys offer with the African American Breast Cancer Alliance?
Well, for one thing, before COVID, we were very active in the community doing health fairs and presentations about breast cancer in black women. After COVID, we're not as active in person, but we are active online. So we have always had a support group for these last 32 years, and that's where word of mouth really helps. We were able to put our information in the hospitals and clinics, social service agencies, who helped us share the information throughout the community, so that just walking into, say, your doctor's office, you might see our brochure, and they say, oh, and it helps, because you don't want to be turned away when you ask a doctor, oh, do you have any information about black women and breast cancer? And they say no, and it's like, before the internet, how did you get that information? You know, it was really hard. And I've had several women tell me, I wish I had known about you 2-3 years ago when I was going through my breast cancer journey. And it's always something, it really warms us to know that some woman will say, you really helped me. Even though I don't come to the group that often, you really helped me to know that I'm not alone. And it helped my husband because he understood what I was going through. It helped my children because I could explain to them what was going on with mom. And it helps us to know that if there's a person out there that's going through this, someone will say, well, you know, there's an African American black women's group out there. You know, so that's great, you know, because taking the information around and taking cancer out of the closet is our goal.
I think that's powerful. I just want to talk a little bit about what the American Cancer Society is saying around racial disparities. You touched on this a little bit when you were talking about our earlier question. The reason for racial disparity is largely driven by decades of structural racism, leading to a higher risk of lower socioeconomic status. The main cause is inadequate health insurance. And you talked a little bit earlier about younger women being diagnosed younger, but having more, being further along in their stage of breast cancer when they're diagnosed, which then results in making their care more expensive.
Correct.
And they're not able to be covered by their insurance, or some forms of Medicaid have not expanded to cover that. Right. So people are being overrepresented and undersupported fiscally in their breast cancer journeys. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's so many factors, I think. First of all, when people don't understand what breast cancer is, it tends to cloud over their actions. You know, if they find something strange, act on it, go to the doctor. But a lot of women will say, well, I don't have the money to do that, I don't have time, I don't have insurance, or they have low insurance. So they delay treatment and detection. And unfortunately, that does cause late stage diagnosis. But the other side of that is there is great treatment here in Minnesota for sure. So we have good treatments here. Other places, maybe in the South, don't. But the one thing I would say, being that this is your life, just seek out as much information and financial assistance as you can. There are so many state-funded breast cancer detection programs. And there are also a lot of clinical studies that will pay for treatment. So asking the doctor about treatment is key. A lot of women don't think they can ask the question, or they're afraid of clinical trials in the first place. And a clinical trial can be either total treatment, or it could be lifestyle results, how a person makes it through the treatment.
Okay.
So there are different types of protocols and clinical trials, but find every kind of resource you can to treat your breast cancer, because you're worthy of this. And I think in a lot of ways, women tend to think, oh, I don't want to bother the doctors, or I don't want to bother, it's too much work to go through the hoops. Go through the hoops, please. You know, contact an agency to find out what you do. Nurse navigators at the hospital, social workers at the hospital, they're there for you. That's what their job is, to navigate you through the process. Because we have too many women dying because of inaction and because of late diagnosis and not understanding what all the treatments will do. And yes, it's hard. It's hard. But, and people are embarrassed, but you know, we said, don't die of embarrassment, please. don't die of shame. There's no shame in being diagnosed with a disease, but we have to take responsibility for our own health care too.
I think that's very powerful. Can you share with me a bit of a takeaway you wish to offer the public by doing this work?
Well, we've been doing this for 32 years. I certainly didn't think I'd still be here doing this, but we are. And if someone wants to volunteer with us to help us spread the word, we welcome them. We have a lot of ladies that have actually gone out into the community and door knocked about breast cancer. So that's something. I know with COVID, it's a little different, so we have to find new and more inventive ways to get out there. But the goal is to save a sister. And women that are going through so much in their lives, child care, domestic abuse, chemical dependency, those things can hamper them from taking care of their lives. And it's unfortunate, but it's like, please ask for help. And if you know someone that's going through breast cancer, share our information. Now with the internet, you can find information about breast cancer, support groups, funding, all over. So it's almost like there's no excuse, but it starts with you. It starts with the woman. It starts with the man. And I've had family members actually say, you know, I tried to tell her, but it's until the woman decides it's important for her to live and continue to be there, because that's our motto when we first started. Our brochure was called Being There. We're always there for everyone else, and we always put ourselves last. So now our Being There motto has grown into share, support, and survive. Share the information, seek support, and learn how to survive.
I think that's so powerful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've talked a little bit about the work that you've done personally, but also with your team at your organization.
Mm-hmm.
How can we support you as a community to help you further this amazing work you guys are doing over at the African American Breast Cancer Alliance?
Well, we do want to get back onto our road of being out in the community. So we're trying to come up with different programs to help. We collaborate with other community organizations also, but we need to start back from our really high days that we had really great turnouts. And I know COVID is restricting that in a lot of ways, so we need to come up with some new ideas and be able to reach the women that need the services and the community in general, because I think we're losing too many black women to this disease unnecessarily. I think if, say, we could get more volunteers into community organizations, actually create a network, because that's what our goal is, to create a network where black women, men, families, and community are connected with information and services. And there are tons of services around, but if a person doesn't know about them, you know, it's hard to navigate that. So we've been lucky through the Larry Fitzgerald Foundation that he has funded us for years. We just received a grant from the Minnesota Fast Break Foundation of the Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx. So we are actually going to rev up our programs, and we need help doing that. And I actually, right now, since I am basically the oldest member of the organization, so we're looking for an executive director to help us get started on that process.
Well, that's wonderful. Hopefully somebody just heard that tidbit. If you are interested in becoming the executive director at the African American Breast Cancer Alliance, please reach out to Miss Reona Berry and her team so that they can vet you and make sure you are fit for the job, so that you can pass the torch on and continue to do the good work.
Absolutely.
Kid, you spoke a little bit about your brochure. I want to give you an opportunity to not only show that to our viewers, but also to provide us with any social media handles handles or web addresses that you have so that we can better stay connected with you?
Yeah. Well, we actually have a website and it has just been relaunched and redesigned. And we're getting into Instagram, and it's like I know Instagram, so we have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We haven't used that too much, but basically it's a lot of word of mouth and hand to hand, and actually our website, we get a lot of hits off our website, and because most of the women actually are over 30, 40s, that's where most of our requests for information. And we started our new financial assistance program called Little Help, Little Hope. And so we've opened it up to women with breast cancer, active breast cancer treatment in the last 2 years, so that they can get a little help going through their treatments, simply because it can be a financial burden, co-pays, transportation, food, housing, utilities. So we fund those type of things, so we've received a lot. We just opened it up, but we received a lot of requests.
Can you share the web address with the public so that they can actually stop by and keep track of what's going on with you all?
It's www.aabcainc.org.
Can you just share a final message for anyone watching this and is either fearful or questioning if they have some of the symptoms or encountering something like you when you were talking about brushing your arm against your side and then feeling, the lump? Can you talk a little bit about that and provide a final message for anyone watching?
Well, learning about the symptoms of breast cancer are important. It's usually, everyone thinks it's a lump, but sometimes it can be a rash. It can be where the nipple starts inverting, or there could be blood or pus or fluid dripping from the nipple. It could be where the breast expands, grows large. It could be where the breast shrinks or has a skin change, like it's grapefruit or orange peel kind of texture. In some cases, the breast could be hard as a rock, and that's not normal. And that's why we say understand what changes in breasts are about, because if it's not normal, then call your doctor, make an appointment, get it checked, because there are so many different types of breast cancer that we have no idea that we're actually experiencing a symptom. We have women and men that think that they've pulled a muscle, and that's another symptom. And it's hard to know because the symptoms can be varied with different people. And we have information online in we call it our Breast Cancer 411, and we have our brochures, and this is one of them, to actually put a black face on breast cancer. So to let black women know, yes, you have to be worried about this. And if they ever need information that they want to share at their church, if they're doing a health fair, all they have to do is order our brochures, and we send it to them. And we're going to send them free, simply because we don't want anyone to not do a presentation to help other women and families to learn about breast cancer. And so all they have to do is contact us at aabcainc.org.
I am so excited to have been here and shared this time with you today. I am a young African American woman, over 35, and I have recently not only looked up testing and things, but also had breast cancer touch my family, with my very own mother being diagnosed this past July. So this is not only in my neck of the woods, but I thought such pertinent information to share with our viewership. And I want to thank you for your work and your wonderful team. And I hope someone has found this information not only educational, but also purposeful, and gets their feet to moving to talk to their primary to get a mammogram, to get genetic testing done so that they can see if they are predisposed to the gene that is carrying breast cancer.
Absolutely.
And hopefully save a sister, like you just said. Thank you, Ms. Berry, for your time.
Thank you so much. It was great.
That is all the time that we have for today's episode of Community Connections. I am your host, Anna Orr, and a special thank you to Ms. Reona Berry and her team at the African American Breast Cancer Alliance. I hope something shared today has encouraged you, you found educational and or purposeful, and encourages you to not only get genetic tested, but also get a mammogram and speak to your primary physician. Please do not let fear overtake you and allow you to be one of these statistics that's finding out on the back end how deadly breast cancer can be. This has been a special episode to me, and I just want to say I love you, Mom. Sherry Strong.